the Hubbardston Planning Board. Planning Board meetings are broadcast live and digitally recorded. This meeting is being held both in person and virtually through Microsoft Teams pursuant to Section 20 of the Acts of 2021, allowing public meetings to be conducted remotely so that board and committee members, as well as members of the public, can participate remotely. Recognizing that we do have a quorum present in the room, that we have Mr. Steiger, Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Russell. We are missing Mr. Demalia and Mr. Holman. Yep. Moving forward on the agenda, we have public comments. Do we have anybody here or online for public comments for an item that is not on the agenda?
I would just like to be on the record noting that even though I'm virtual, I think an item that should be of your attention is the amount of agricultural commission members in the room. So just be careful. I don't know if a third member shows up, if they're at quorum or not.
Okay. Noted, thank you. All right, so moving forward on the agenda, we have the acceptance of the previous meeting's minutes, and this is going back to July 17th of 2025. The minutes have been made available to the planning board members through the drive, through email, and also provided to them in their packets for this evening. Our typical process for handling this is to do a motion, a second, and then deal with corrections or adjustments during the discussion period by friendly amendment. Would somebody like to make that initial motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion that the planning board agenda of July the 17th be, I don't want to review but accepted.
And I'll second. Here in a first and a second, calling for discussion and corrections.
None from me.
I'm here.
Excuse me too. All right, hearing no corrections, I'm calling a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Aye.
And the chair is aye. The minutes are accepted. Moving forward on the agenda, we have the planner's report. Alec, do you want to take that as an item now or take it as incorporated with the agenda items?
So we'll incorporate it into the future items, but one item I want to call to your attention in case we don't get to it before I sign off at 8 o'clock. The state has announced its public review period, and it's accepting comments on social consumption as a marijuana use type. I can describe that more in depth, but given your bylaws and the flexibility specifically for the business district, I do think it bears discussing whether that's a use that the town has considered, and whether it's something you do want to be receptive to in the future.
All right, thank you. We'll add that to an agenda for an upcoming meeting. Thank you. All right, so moving forward into the agenda, we have new business, and first under that is prepare for Sandpit Overlay Public Forum. I think this is a relatively quick item, so I'm just going to stay in order for the moment, and then we'll move on to the ecotourism, agritourism. So, Alec, can you please tell us about that one?
Which item? The ecotourism and agricultural use?
The Sandpit Overlay Public Forum that we have coming up.
I believe your public forum is scheduled for next week. It is hosted by your consultant, which is Meach Engineering. They have designed a few different exercises which accompanies a public survey exercise, and I will let them run, guide, and explain the process.
Excellent, thank you. And just to add to that, we have had the preliminary results of the survey made available to the advisory committee on that, and it appears that there's quite a bit of ways to go in terms of educating the public on what's going on there. There seems to be a bit of a misconception that the town has proposed a development and the town is working on creating some form of development, completely missing the issue that most of this land has already been purchased by a developer, and that those decisions are in private hands and that we're just talking about an overlay. But it was pretty consistent through a lot of the free-form text that came in on the surveys, that there's some real fundamental misunderstandings. So it's pretty important that we get the message out that that's going on. I personally am gonna have a conflict, so I will not be able to attend that. But I do encourage the members to attend. Do we need to post that just in case?
To post that we're having the meeting, that we're having.
Yeah, and also post as a planning board meeting in case a quorum
a
shows up.
quorum. I can do that.
Okay.
Is it considered a meeting or a workshop? Are decisions being made at the meeting?
Best practice
Yeah.
would be to post that.
Fair enough, but is it a meeting or is it a workshop?
It's a workshop.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a public listening session, primarily run by the engineering firm, not by us.
But your concern, Mr. Chair, is that there's a quorum
Yes.
possibly present, so err on the side of caution and post it.
Yep. Yep, to avoid any potential issues with the open meeting laws, correct. All right, anything else to add on that, either Nate or Alec?
Can I
Oh,
ask
yeah,
a
thank you,
question?
Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Yeah. At the last meeting, we talked a lot about the adjacent properties and how this whole region is sort of a potential development target. So I'm just curious if we, looking at just the sand pit overlay as one piece, is missing the bigger picture of whether that zone or that region, which as I look more and more at the master plan for the town, kind of looks like a choice area for development of business, commercial, shouldn't be brought to the attention, our attention, as to whether it should be considered for rezoning.
Yeah, I believe Nietzsche's gonna go into that in great depth at that meeting.
The impacts to the surrounding properties as well.
Yes.
Are we thinking that way? I mean, is that something we have in our minds, that we're not just talking about what the town owns, but what the zoning should be in that area?
It's the zone, the charge for the engineering firm
Oh.
is to look at a zoning overlay that would essentially cover the properties that abut the sandpit properties too.
Oh,
So the ones
okay,
that
so
are-
it's not truly a sand pit overlay then? It's-
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe a misunderstanding what was meant by sand pit overlay.
Yeah, there's, Alec, there's what, 7 or 8 parcels, but it turns out to be a pretty huge amount of land.
Okay, maybe a misnomer, perhaps we should rebrand it.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally a fair criticism.
Mm.
And I think in line with that criticism is a lot of what the early feedback, it's in line with what a lot of the early feedback
Oh,
has been.
okay.
That the message has not gotten out on this at all.
Right.
And that the public doesn't understand what's going on here, just as a general proposition.
Yeah.
And they're gonna go through some of this information, and we're certainly gonna go through it a lot as a committee, but there's a pretty big disconnect in the initial results on what people think is going on
Mhm.
versus what is going on and how the laws work.
Sure.
And then what the impact is, like, on the preliminary results, so far, building single-family houses is leading by a huge margin. But I think that that's kind of decoupled from the idea of what does that actually mean to tax bills into the school system.
Mhm.
Because if there were to be 900 single-family homes put up in that part of town, we would live in a very different place very quickly. So.
My fear as well, yeah.
Yeah, so all of that's gonna get addressed all of that is gonna start getting discussed because we're still just at the public input stage. We're hoping for our engineering firm to lead that in a pretty productive way.
Okay.
But we're certainly learning stuff about where the sentiment's at and what the base level of understanding is.
Will there be any, is there any thought about also introducing into the conversation the fact that we may be an adjoining town to an MBTA station in the future? And who's addressing that?
Yeah, that's certainly a factor in the plan. So there's some information that's available on what the scope of this is on the town website. But yeah, all of that is being incorporated into the process, and this is just one more step in the process. This is not them delivering what their proposed recommendation is. This is
On this
them-
particular matter?
Yeah, on this particular matter. This is them learning more about where people are at and working the education process further, because there's a lot to go.
There's one thing I've been thinking about. There seems to be a fair number of people who are on the Hubbardston Facebook page. And it may be a way to reach more people from our communications if we wanna educate before we ask more questions.
Yeah, and there's certainly been efforts to do that. The study and the public forum has all been promoted by the town, and has also appeared on those groups. But there's also just kind of
Mr. Chair,
Yeah. Go ahead.
just note that Leanne and I couldn't really promote this harder. I went on a magazine, we went in the Gardner News. It's been shared to the Facebook page a number of times, so there has been a considerable amount of outreach, especially for a rural municipal project.
Yeah, that is absolutely a fair statement, so. All right, so yeah, that's next week. It's an important step in the process, but it is not the process itself. All right, so moving forward on the agenda, we have the ecotourism and agricultural accessory use bylaw. Just from a matter of history on this is something that we've looked at, and it's been identified, I believe, in both our master plan. It's been identified in the rural 11 plan, and also elements of it were identified in the Quabbin intermunicipal partnership plan. Did I get that right? I think I did. So it's been something that's been kind of long in process. There was a project that went on to try to do this a year or two ago that went on for a couple of years. That was following along with what Rutland had originally proposed. And that project had actually received DLTA funding, in addition to some money that the planning board had spent out of its agenda. And it went along for a ways, and then ultimately fell apart at the final hearing. We've had this brought back up by constituents and by the Ag Committee. So I'd actually like to, I believe, Katie, your name's associated on the top of this, so hear from you first on it.
If you want,
Sure.
we're kind of all talking about the same thing, so the three of us.
Well, your name got stuck on the agenda.
What's new?
So yeah, please just identify yourself for the record and let us know what's going on here.
Yeah, so Katie Young, 86 Ragged Hill Road. Like you said, this has been a long time in the works by lots of different people, lots of different committees, residents, all boards, all kinds of stuff. And it stalled hard right before the finish line, and it has been sitting dormant. So unbeknownst to me, I knew the ag was trying to work on it, but I don't know how far they got. Jeff, my husband, and myself, like, well, let's take a crack at it and see if we can start fixing this, because I know where it failed, I know why it failed, I understand the concepts of what the problems were. So we took a crack at it, and I got the last point of where we were at the last planning board meeting and cleaned up what was there, and I fixed what I thought was a parking issue. And then Jeff and I worked on the large form compared to small form, and taking out the words at 4 times a year, removing that completely, and just having things be, it's like, this is this size event, doesn't matter if it's more than 4, it's gotta be over this amount of people. So just kind of cleaning it up. I will say though, in the version we came up with, I still feel like there's a major fault in it, and the major fault is that a large event form still falls under the special permit, whereas a large event may not necessarily need a special permit. For an example, if, say, a large hay person with large hay fields decided they wanted to have a huge concert, they could, in theory, put 2 flatbed trucks and a generator and get a bunch of porta potties and have 1,000 people there listening to music, and there's no actual physical structures. So to have a special permit, I still feel like that large event needs to be teased out of the special permit, because the special permit, I feel, would be more for large structures, like if they're building a pavilion or you're putting in a brewery or something of that nature, you'd have to go through the special permit, and then when you have the events, have a large event form, just so if the police detail's needed, whatever. But I did put in for a small event form, because I know the town's gonna wanna know this kind of stuff, thinking about it, but it's a 1 a year and done. So the farmers can do it in like January, put them all on there, be done with it for the best of their knowledge of what they will most likely have. And I took out all it would have to be 350 people at one time. So in other words, if you had a long day event, you could have over 350 people, but if it's over a course of a whole day or a weekend, it wouldn't hit that number of, and trigger that large event. It would still be considered a small event. Something like a fair, or like the Country Roads Tour, things like that. Those numbers are gonna be there, but it's gonna be over a course of the whole event. So there's no need for a large event and to cause all this extra headaches for a farmer when there's not 350 people there at one time, because that's where the problems will be if you have a large quantity of people for, say, a concert or a wedding or corn mazes or something that's gonna need like more than just, okay, great, you guys are having it, you're gonna need like a traffic detail or something to that effect that's gonna trigger things to that nature. So that's where we went with it. Now, I know the ag has gone places with theirs, and they may have some better ideas on how to fix things. So, yeah, I know, that was really long, twisted.
No, that's fine.
We're taking the
So-
long road, folks.
So, I guess just to be efficient, and also because this has come up at the board previously, I don't think there's anybody on the board that is an objection to putting this back on our agenda and having Alec work with folks to fine tune this to something that we can put back out as a proposal. Because one thing that's very different from when we last looked at this is we actually have an in-house planner, which is a total complete game changer compared to having to try to coordinate with external consultants on it. So we'll certainly give everybody time to speak, assuming they want to, but just also in the interest of efficiency. Is there anybody that feels we should put this back on our agenda and tell Alec to start working on it?
No opposition to mine.
No opposition. I think it's a good idea to refresh this, rather than just go straight into it, but to refresh it, but first get Alex to review it and see how our proposals compare to other communities as an example. Definitely.
All right. So,
Chris,
yes.
if I may, there's a couple of questions that may supersede us, but one is, I'm trying to square this with the town's general bylaws, which define agricultural operations and uses. And in fact, what I've seen in this regulation, which may be or may not be superseded by the bylaws themselves, I see authorities and uses that exceed what were in the bylaws. Specifically commercial operations such as distilling alcohol and selling prepared foods that are part of the operation of a farm. I think the idea of farmers markets are wonderful, and community gatherings like this are great. Whether or not they need special permits, I'm indifferent about. But I think if we're talking about moving the residential agricultural district into a pseudo commercial operation, I have concerns.
So where this originally came from, and this probably provides some interesting things to look at around some of the points that you made, is Rutland had originally proposed a very similar bylaw as an agricultural accessory use, where if a property made a certain threshold, and there are hours of discussion on what that threshold should look like that we've had, and probably hours of discussion that we'll have in the future on what that threshold should look like. But that if a property made that farm threshold, then certain uses came in as agricultural accessory uses. And there is some guidance from the state that actually extends agricultural accessory uses far beyond what is contemplated in our bylaws as they are now. So to some degree, a lot of what we have is already not enforceable when it comes to these agricultural accessory uses. So some percentage of this would just be pulling ourselves in line with what the state says for ag accessory. Some of it is potentially going a little bit further, and that's all stuff for us to certainly talk about and debate. Even some of those uses that appear to be more commercial are recognized by the state as being agricultural accessory use. Where it gets weird and where it becomes very nuanced very quickly is whether or not you determine the primary use of a property being agricultural based upon dollars, based upon revenue, based upon square footage or acreage or whatever. One of the issues that came up and was debated pretty heavily here is that ultimately Hubbardston needed this bylaw 20 years ago because we moved into a position where we have lots of people who have farms. It's essentially their second job, not their first job. And to set it up for a dollar for dollar standpoint wasn't going to arrive at an equitable result. But there are certainly lots of fine nuances around what you're talking about that tie back to that I think we need some guidance from Alec on. I also think that potentially if we look at this, and this is something that I'd like Alec to look at in particular, is whether this essentially gets split into two parts. And one of the parts would be things that were clearly agricultural accessory uses to go specifically as an agricultural accessory use bylaw, which is reasonable to just stick on as an additional article. But some of this probably would come to an amendment to Article 4, potentially in some places, or for a broader rezoning. But I certainly think there's a lot of conversation to have about that. I don't think we're going to solve all of it tonight, but I think we can get to, it's time for Alec to take a look at it.
Yeah, okay.
Is it all righty?
Yeah, sure. And so, Alec, just so that's noted and known for the record, planning board's in support of picking this back up and having Alec dedicate some of his time to helping us come up with something that we'll think will be passable. And with that, if anybody has any additional public comment on it, we'll certainly take it.
So my name's Kathy Hansgate, 143 Williamsville Road, Ladybug Farm Produce. I'm secretary of the Ag Commission, and Keith Tucholtz is also here as president of the Hubbardston Ag Commission. We have worked on cleaning up that last document where, as farmers, we felt there was inaccurate definitions and things like that throughout 2024 into the spring of 2025. What I would like to give you is we had cleaned up part of the document. which we thought would be held as a farm accessory bylaw, okay? Just looking at that part. And, it was edited up to a certain point by March 17th. We finished the rest of it, in the April meeting. However, the Ag Commission then stopped working on it and devoted our energies towards Farm to School Day in June, and then we don't meet over the summer. So, yes, we would love to have, involvement with the town planner. And I don't have the final version of the last couple pages of where we thought word changes might be useful, but I have copies of the first part to give to everybody tonight. And that's all I want to say. We'll be glad to be involved as we go forward, and thank you for picking it up again.
Sure, we're particularly interested in electronic copies if you have to. We'll take the paper copies, but electronic makes it easier to work.
Yes, we can just ask Mel for a copy. She does most of our typing for us and stuff. I do regular minutes, but she does this sort of thing. And I've been too busy to even think about pulling out anything else other than the paper copies. Okay?
We'll take a copy
Excellent.
to
Yes.
scan in also.
Yeah, so there's copies for all of you.
Thank you.
Ricky.
Excellent. Any additional comment on that?
And that's all we wanted to do is let you know that we have been working on it as the Ag Commission from the point of view of farmers. And you don't need to look at it tonight or anything, you can look at it whenever you want, because this is just the beginning, and we're just, letting you have that, that's all.
Excellent, thank you.
No big deal, you know? We just wanna help out and get it sorted out too. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you very much. If
Thank
you don't
you.
mind,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go home and eat dinner.
Thanks for coming by.
All right.
Zucchini again?
Nope. Thanks.
Thank you.
Heather made me an Italian sandwich out of zucchini. So the bread was zucchini with cheese on it that was cooked crispy on a panini press,
That sounds
folded
good.
over and then made into an Italian sandwich.
Wow,
Like it was amazing.
that sounds good.
Well, because like, what do you do with all,
Bring us?
what do you do with all the leftover giant zucchini?
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
It's
you
from
melt
in
cheese
the
on it
woods.
and use it
Make
like
zucchini
bread.
bread and freeze it for winter.
Yeah. It's really delightful. All right, so moving down, we have, which this obviously, previous discussion now influences this. We have the goal setting exercise. So, Alec, will you get us started on that one?
Absolutely, bear with me, everybody, I'm just gonna, actually,
Well, while
Sure.
Alec is grabbing that, I'll kick it off while you're looking. So historically, for the last couple of years since I've become chair, I've been trying to chair with a plan and not necessarily from the seat of my pants. So each year, we've done a bit of a goal-setting exercise where we've looked at items that were listed in the master plan along with projects that we've discussed at the meetings and put it up for discussion so that we can figure out what we're gonna work on for the year. It's become particularly important since we've got a town planner, because we only have him for so much time. So he can't work on every project. And we've actually made quite a lot of progress on the items we picked over the last 2 years. So we ultimately need to come up with 3 or 4 items that are at the top of the list, because that's what we pragmatically have a chance to get to. So we're here to talk about that tonight. Ready now?
that's great.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So as Nate said, we made a good, as Chris said, we made a good deal of progress last fiscal year. We started with 12 projects in the planning board's prioritized list, and of those 12, 5 are either in progress or fully complete, 3 of those being complete and 2 in progress. So that's roughly just under 50% that we were able to get moving and check off in year 1. What we did for this exercise is board members were circulated a Microsoft Forms survey, which allowed you to reorganize these remaining 7, as well as propose new goals and objectives. What we saw very simply, and I'll note there were only 3 participants in this survey, so if the board wishes, we can return this for circulation for the other 2. But what we noted here is that there was a clear distinction. The 2 highest scoring or highest ranking were alignment of the zoning bylaw with economic development goals and alignment of the bylaw for agricultural, accessory, and ecotourism uses. So that's specifically bringing forward a bylaw similar to or a variation of what was just discussed and what was previously brought to annual town meeting in 2024. A close tie at 3rd and 4 were revisions to the marijuana bylaws and annual reporting procedures for cannabis and solar facilities, with the remainders receiving low votes pretty much across the board. We've highlighted those 2 here, and I'll also note that additional projects were proposed, completion of an update to the master plan and zoning map. I note this is a project that would require additional fundraising and significant staff support, so that would be certainly a longer range goal, not something that could be implemented within a single fiscal year. That would likely take at least into a second, if not third, to complete your fundraising and assign the procurement to a specific contractor. And then we did receive another proposal, implement a table of uses to replace the narrative of Article 4. I note that that is a project that could easily be implemented within a single fiscal year, and I think it would dovetail nicely off of both the agricultural, accessory, and ecotourism bylaws, as well as the proposed amendments that we're considering for the business district, which we're working with MRPC to conduct. And so my recommendations going into the fiscal year, so long as you don't want to reissue this exercise for complete participation, would be that we implement a standard table of uses alongside the 2 highest ranking goals, those being alignment of the zoning bylaw with economic development goals, as well as agricultural, accessory, and ecotourism bylaws. I noted earlier that the implementation of the table of uses fits well with this. Specifically, alignment of the zoning bylaw for economic development goals can be accomplished through a comprehensive reevaluation of your table of uses. So we would first establish the table of uses, develop what it looks like today, and then that would allow us to very methodically go through and consider what could be done by right, by special permit, or otherwise be excluded in certain districts. So take a temperature of the room where you stand today, do the simple analysis and visualize it through the table of uses, and then reevaluate prior to bringing that to town meeting.
All right, question or comments from the board?
I was the one who suggested we work more diligently on the zoning map and master plan, because I think that is in fact the same goal as making it align with economic development of the town. They're 2 parts of the same problem. And so, as I was looking at the grant opportunities that you circulated, I noted that there's a LEAP opportunity for a grant, which is in very small print, but the gist of it is that we may be able to get support for planning for rural communities, which may not have the resources to do the thorough planning that's appropriate for something as large as this sand pit project that we're facing or wanting to move forward in some fashion. So, I read most of the master plan. I think it's a great background document. It made me appreciate how much of the town can't be developed. It made me understand the little bit we have for developable property should be cherished and protected in some way so that it meets the goal of economic development that's necessary to rebalance our tax base and expenditures.
So, and I'm asking this as, I suppose, mostly a question for Alec, and also just from a historical standpoint. There are a lot of issues with what we currently have published as our master plan.
Mm-hmm.
It ultimately started in 2017, and I would say was marginally completed in 2024, ultimately just because we had to complete it, And COVID was a big factor in it, but
Mhm.
the process had fallen off the rails a little bit before COVID, and COVID just broke the process. So the idea that our master plan needs to be gone through and that a lot of this needs to be looked in the context of it, I think is really a pretty reasonable position. But where I struggle, or where I become concerned, is with our master plan being what I would call somewhat broken, but not being that old. Would we do okay with any of the grant programs trying to rebuild it? And then, and these are, I suppose, mostly questions for Alec, on whether or not we potentially qualify for any of those grants with our master plan being somewhat recent. And then from there, what does it pragmatically look like to try to do that with an organization that's not necessarily our RPO, just because of the way the last master plan went with our RPO?
So, let's talk about it first from a funding standpoint. A master plan exercise, particularly if you want to consult an outside resource, so not your RPO, and you don't want to do it in-house planning board and planner, which you're not in a position to do the latter of. Like, there aren't enough hours for me to be able to take on something to that effect, even supporting the board. Which leaves you with the RPO, who recently produced a master plan document for the town, versus going out to see a consultant. The sentiment that I've heard over and over is that if this exercise was to be redone, you would want to do it with an outside consultant, which at this stage I would recommend. You tried it once the other way, it was not as successful as was hoped. So we would want to go the other approach. I would tell you that a good master plan conducted by an outside consultant, you need to budget at least $150,000 for it, upwards to $200,000 if you want to implement a high-tech public engagement platform, something like Co-Urbanize in the process. It's not a cheap endeavor, which then brings us to the funding mechanism. How exactly do we fund it? In this case, where your master plan was recently redone, and it was characterized at the time as being redone, you would have to make a fairly public statement that the town does not endorse the plan that it received. There's obviously some political implications for doing that, your participation in the regional planning organization being one of them, but it's not out of the question. If ultimately the work product you receive is not something you're satisfied with, it is your right and responsibility as a community to go out and to seek a better document. But that being said, I don't think we've fully pared down the master plan you received to understand if it's going to help you accomplish what you need. One exercise we could do is we could pull out simply the recommendations of the master plan itself. We could look at those in a matrix and understand whether that satisfies the need. The goal of the master plan, beyond just giving guidance, really at its core, is to highlight the areas you'll seek implementation in. While the plan might not be something you're fully satisfied with, if it gives you all of the talking points you need for your various grant applications, for your town meeting warrant articles and selling things on the floor, then you can get by for a few more years when you're in a stronger position and you wouldn't have to take such a political stance. But if it doesn't accomplish the goals, then it might be worthwhile to explore an outside alternative.
And recognize.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
just to complement that, I have parsed the goals from the master plan in the past and have them in a data document.
Thank you.
That is all.
So Alec, we have certainly gotten some mileage out of the master plan as it was written, because we were able to have some impact on the later iterations of it. I guess it's 2025 already, and we had technically started the last master plan in 2017. So would the 10-year time clock on that go from 2017, or would it go from 23, or was it 24 when we voted on the last chapter of it?
I think what would be most practical is if you looked backwards on the clock. Let's assume that since you started this in 2017, it's a 2 to 3 year exercise followed by maybe a year's worth of adoption exercises. So you naturally would have completed it in 2021. But even yourself, Mr. Chairperson, you noted that the pandemic alone held up the publication of this and in some way impacted the ultimate deliverable. Instead, what we could do is we could reframe the exercise. So we could reevaluate the work that was done, take a look at that matrix. You could take another approach. If you're finding that you've accomplished many of the unique or new goals that were put forward in the master plan, and that due to the pandemic and the odd scheduling of how this exercise had to go, perhaps the master plan has run its course and lived out its life cycle earlier than expected. That's a different frame to take. It's a slightly harder argument to sell, but it's not an impossible one to sell. There have certainly been master plans that were originally scoped out for, let's say, 10 years, and 3 years into it, you're 80 to 90% of the way done. You're sitting around saying, well, what's the longevity of this? How are we going to take next steps if we're already so far ahead?
I think in our case, that's actually potentially the solution that makes the most sense. Because probably 40% of the action items in the master plan were done before the master plan was accepted. And where it particularly goes wrong is actually the development calculations. Because they, what I would recommend looking at for development calculations is actually the one put out by the Open Space Committee and the Open Space Recreation Plan. Because Mark Kresge had gone in and pulled apart their numbers and manually recalculated them and came up with pretty different numbers from what MRPC had presented, because the way they bundled partial constraints and absolute constraints was not really accurate. So there actually is more land potentially available for development than was originally listed in the master plan according to the open space numbers, which we do have the math on the back end for. So that might be the way to approach it, and perhaps this is something that we need to pick back up later on in the year. I think it's probably past the scope of what we're talking about with goal setting here, but I think it's something that we need to return back to as we approach the end of the year and talk about how we want to do it in future years.
Can you remind us what the delta was in what Mark Kresge found in terms of how much of a increase that was?
It was like 3 or 4%. MRPC, in their original calculations, had developable land at 2% of the town. And then when Mark went through and he looked at the partial constraints versus absolute constraints, he came up with like 5 or 7%.
So easy, a duplicate or almost 3 times, between
Yeah.
2 and 2.5 times, which is significant.
Yeah,
That
a
in
meaningful
itself-
amount.
That in itself should trigger a review of this.
Yeah, and
For your portion.
and Tracy from MRPC did redo the calculations. I don't know if if those made it to the version that's on the website, because we had actually approved it with the wrong numbers, because we didn't know. It's not like we even have the ability to go back in and manually recalculate everything that went on.
But that's a significant component in terms of the characteristic of our town and has financial implications, has
Oh, yeah.
development implication. For all intents and purposes, really turned the master plan on its head. And I think therefore, that should be the crux that we should be following on how to potentially really re-review the master plan.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah, because read in context with some of the other documents that we have as a town, I think the master plan as we have it is still useful when you read it in combination with the open space plan.
Yeah.
And you read it in context with some of these other North Star documents. Granted, it's old at this point, but the housing production plan wasn't bad when it came out. All together, it kind of gets us to where the master plan is supposed to be, but.
I look at it more from the perspective of the financial implications for the town. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, from a total developable land, it's still small. But the implication from a tax perspective and the implications from revenue, and the implications that it has for once it is developed, and the implications for schools, for police, for plowing, et cetera, are significant.
Yeah.
And percentage-wise, that's certainly something that should, therefore, that's the trigger point, again. I reiterate that.
Yeah. All right, so,
A master plan, in my way of thinking, is to get to the narrower goal of optimizing the zoning of town in relation to what can be developed, what can't be developed, where is it best serviced with municipal services, obviously on the Gardner end of town, and, you know, from a traffic control point of view. You know, trips per day out of the town.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah,
and the revenue coming into town. That's the ideal, of course, not achievable in all cases.
yeah, and certainly it didn't go to that level of depth,
Yeah.
but,
Because that's really the only thing that really matters, is at the end of the day, we have zones that encourage development in ways to generate tax revenue. That's the same as the number one goal we put up there, right?
yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so in terms of what's actually actionable out of this, it sounds like we do have alignment on the goals. Does the board wanna hold it open to try to get the other two members to respond, until the next meeting before we formalize it? What's the thoughts?
I think it's worth it. However, I think it means therefore that we don't just simply send the email, but we have some active prodding of our members that, as best as we can by.
Everybody got 2 emails and a text message. I'm not gonna show up at people's houses.
No. I'm talking about maybe text messages plus phone calls type
Yeah.
of situation. That's what I'm saying
Yeah,
here.
no, we can certainly do that again.
I'm just not in favor of just extending the deadline.
Okay, so we can certainly flag it for enhanced follow-up. I like the idea that you making sure we give everybody the opportunity, and the window we had to respond to this was short. We did only have 2 days. So for that reason alone, I lean towards keeping it open until the next meeting and calling this a preliminary result. But it sounds like we're all in agreement that
Yep.
what we have so far is a valid response, as long as it doesn't somehow get wildly weighted the other way, which I doubt it will, because these are goals that came off of our previous goal setting session, and they're essentially the next ones up on the list anyways from the last time we did this. So unless people have wildly different feelings from last year, I think it's gonna be pretty consistent. So, all right. Anything else you needed on that, Alec?
No, so we'll leave this open so that board members can continue responding. What I will note, based on the last discussion and the draft ranking so far, while I won't be able to attend your next meeting, I will prepare in advance of the meeting a memo, what I'll call a diagnostic report, specifically on the original proposed agricultural accessory and ecotourism bylaw. So that way you can begin mulling over my opinions, my areas of recommendation, and I'll pair that with the various drafts you've received from members of the public. So that way you can begin working on that project. I'll note with these two at the top, it would take last place votes by both the remaining board members to really skew these two towards the bottom. So I feel pretty confident that we can get started in the interim on number 2. And I do believe that between Nate and I, especially where Nate has already done the work to kind of matrix out or to data parse the goals of your master plan, he and I can start a low-level analysis and start checking the boxes to see, all right, this is what has been done, it's in progress, or it hasn't been started, and then we can help visualize that for the board's context moving forward.
Sounds good.
May I ask, well, Alec, is
go ahead.
working on this with respect to the agritourism and agricultural accessory uses, does the town, when we move into an era of serving foods or doing more than just producing foods and selling foods and as a farm, are we encroaching on Board of Health issues with respect to this inspection or controls over these type of operations?
So, what we do doesn't ultimately change what the Board of Health's responsibility is.
Okay.
And one of these drafts that was handed to us by the chair of the Board of Health tonight, so.
So they're okay with assuming the responsibilities of,
Yeah.
okay. I don't know where the resources are, but that's okay.
So,
It's a valid point that you're
yeah,
making.
no,
but-
it is a valid point, and it was discussed fairly heavily, and you'll see in the, so the other history on this is I chaired the working group that attempted to put this together over the period of years. And one of the things that came up in the working group was exactly that question. And there was extensive debate around the language related to jurisdiction of the Board of Health. So there was language put in specifically. There was language originally saying applicants are advised that the Hopkinton Board of Health has jurisdiction, not putting this list on commercial kitchens, provision sanitary facilities, all of that stuff. So none of this would usurp their jurisdiction over any of the sanitary requirements.
Okay.
Just makes it a use, potential use.
Yeah, no, I'm just cautious about adding additional expenses while we're
Yeah.
struggling to keep the bottom line.
Yeah, no,
Can I
there's.
just say something about that? The cost of the inspectional services is paid for by the applicant, just like here. So
Okay.
that's where the fees, you have to pay a fee to be a kitchen, cottage kitchen, or any of that stuff. Therefore.
Net zero?
Yes.
Thank you.
The other big change that was a stumbling block from the last time we did this is our site plan review process that we just updated at the last meeting
Mhm.
was antiquated.
Hmm.
So we didn't have the flexibility to build in site plan review for something like this, but now that we've taken parts of site plan review and moved it to administrative rules, we can adjust our site plan review to potentially work with some of these uses. And Rutland had that as an intermediate level of review in their agricultural accessory bylaw.
Uh-huh.
But we not having a fully developed site plan review
Mhm.
process for ourselves, we could have
Yeah.
used that as an intermediate level of review.
Right.
Because we only had site plan as part of a special permit application.
Yeah,
It was not a
True.
standalone process.
I'm glad to hear that. I was worried about the building inspector being the decision maker here.
Yep. So yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack, and without going too far down the road, based upon what I've learned from the last time, I recommend that one of the first things that Alex should look at is the idea of splitting this into it being accessory uses and then it being adjustments to the table of uses. Looks like Nate has his hand up.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I just want to go on the record to note that with the inspectional services coordinator starting on September 2nd and some of the administrative changes we've been making both as we go, bringing things on to e-permitting, I'm not concerned about the administrative burden of any type of policy change. If there was, like, even on the Board of Health side, we should be all set to handle any sort of increase.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so we already did the discussion of social consumption use. So that pulls us into old business. So we have 155 Williamsville Road zoning request is on as old business. Is that consumed by what we talked about previously, or is that a new item in addition?
Yes, so I would say that's fully consumed in the exercise we're gonna go forward on for ecotourism and agricultural accessory use. In fact, the previous proposal you've heard on 155 Williamsville Road really would be probably on the higher end, or let's call it the most extreme type of accessory use, where it would have septic implications, it would have water effects, things that would need to be planned for and accounted for. And so in this case, you really, it's not a matter of coincidence, you have two polling factors here. You have an individual who's reached out more on the ecotourism or agro-tourism side, and then another that's really tagged into the agricultural accessory use here. And so you have the two dynamic factors that lead into the bylaw. That's two different sets of engagement and input that we've received, and that'll be incorporated herein. To date, I've been doing a little case study on similar businesses to what Rebecca had put forward to us. And so I've been able to kind of understand it a little bit better. I'm going to be making outreach to the municipalities that hold those businesses, as well as the businesses themselves. And then she does owe me a couple items back as well. So I'll be able to deliver that case study as we're going down the agriculture accessory side of this project. But to date, we're just continuing to chip away at that, and now it's fully encompassed in the zoning exercise that we're going to be undertaking.
All right, excellent, thank you. All right, so moving forward into old business, there's the draft letter in support of Oakham. We had talked about this at our meeting, and this also came up at the select board. And the select board has suggested that we should come up with a thoughtful response for this, and then share it back to them. So Francois put this letter together, and it's in the board packet. So we can pause for a moment for everybody to refresh themselves on it.
I read it. I think it's excellent. I think he framed it well as an issue of ecological importance and not as one of legislative mandate. And therefore is appropriate matter for regulatory review, but not to legislate against, you know. And you did it in a way that didn't say, we disagree with the thrust you're taking. So I thought it was very well done.
I mean, I tried to take my intention here was, we do have a best bylaw ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make sure that we take the high road and not just simply oppose something as a NIMBY, but rather put some real reasons behind it. And the fact that we are in a watershed, which is a big issue that we always have had,
Yeah.
especially from the pilot money that we're getting, I think it's very important that we open their eyes to look at other possibilities, especially given the fact that these possibilities are in existence nowadays. These are not Scientific American 2055 solutions, but rather these are solutions that exist nowadays, and they really should be looking at them. And these are utility scale and utility type solutions that are available. But thank you for your comment.
So I'm all in favor.
All right, so
That's,
I would suggest that we just make a couple minor grammatical errors, rather grammatical corrections to
You want to add errors to it?
Yeah, I know. No, it reads too perfect. I mean, it does read a little too perfect. Can you tell me what combination of keys you press on your keyboard in order to get an M dash like that one right there?
Which one?
Right there, the M dash.
you like those shortcuts, huh, Chris?
Sorry, which one? Oh, this,
These are M dashes.
oh, okay.
Do you know what combination of keys you press on your keyboard to get those?
I don't remember, but I think what I do is I
If,
fiddle around with it and.
If I had
Yep.
to hazard a guess, I would assume the final review was done by Grammarly or an AI-powered tool, which
It's
likely put those in.
probably, yes.
So yeah, I would, before
We
signing
can,
it.
we can take those.
Yeah, I would go in and I would
Those.
just take out the M dashes and I would change some of the bolding. But otherwise, I think it reads well. Because we're sending this on behalf of the board, and because I'd like this to not continue stretching through multiple agendas, would somebody just like to make a motion that I sign this on behalf of the board as our statement?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to it with those final grammatical corrections.
And you have,
We'll call them
you have a
humanizing
copy,
it.
you have
To
a copy of this
accept-
here that you can.
I do.
Whatever changes you need, or do you want me to?
Send me the most up-to-date one that you have. I believe I
I've
sent.
not made any changes to it.
Okay, yeah, if you've made no changes, and this is the one
The only other comment that I had is we may want to CC the town of Oakham
Yeah.
on this here.
We do that. We do have a motion open on the floor.
Yep, I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry, I'll second that motion.
There we go. And I assume you meant to say for the discussion period that we should CC the town of Oakland.
That is correct. I would think that that is appropriate, and we should, or any other interested parties that I'm not aware of, but I think
Okay.
that's probably the right one.
Yeah, I'll check with the staff, and we'll also send this to the select board too. That way they know that we have an action on behalf of the town on it.
Thank you.
Because where,
I have the contact information for Acorns, so we'll be fine to send it to them.
okay. Nate, was there anything else you needed us to take a look at with this, or is that satisfactory on what you had for an action item for us?
That's satisfactory. Katie's there and I'm here, so the select board will know.
Okay.
If you could CC me on that as well, or just send it to me and I'll send it to Acorns on your behalf. I'm not exactly certain when they needed things by or anything like that, so we'll figure it out.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so calling a vote,
Schneider, aye?
Carpenter, aye.
and the chair is aye. We've adopted this to send as our position as a board. So moving into administrative matters, we still need to resolve the ex officio posts for folks on the board with other organizations. I don't have the reconcile list between what the organizations think, what the select board thinks, and what we think. So if we don't have anything that urgently needs an appointment, I'd like to push it to our next meeting. Do we have anything that urgently needs an appointment, like does CPC need to meet, or?
I think
anything like
CPC is probably going to have a meeting fairly soon, and I have basically raised my hand that I'll participate as part of the CPC. So if you are okay with just doing that appointment, I'm more than happy to be the nominee for that particular group.
Okay. Anybody else interested in the CPC, and we'll have everybody give their pitch and then take a vote on it, although it would get awkward since there's only 3 of us voting tonight. It'd be great if we all were like, no, I want CPC.
What are the 3 acronyms here? Were they CIPC, EDC, CPC? I know I asked this before.
All right,
I
so-
didn't retain it.
CIPC is Capital Improvement.
Capital
Planning Committee.
Then EDC is Economic Development Committee. CPC is Community
Preservation.
Preservation? I was gonna call it Community Protection, that's something different. Community Preservation Committee. But the ones that are.
That's the, just to, I'm sorry to interrupt, just to clarify, that's the group that also receives many requests for funding, which typically is using the CPA funds that the town collects as part of the taxes.
So what do you want, Chris? I'll take the other by difference.
Well, I pretty much get stuck with MRPC because I'm now the chair of it.
Okay, okay.
And I'm not suggesting that we have to vote on all of them. The CPC, the only one reason I'm saying that one is because I believe there is a meeting coming up soon. And they have an annual requirement to have an annual meeting, so.
I mean, the next most.
Francois,
Yes?
Leanne is the CPC clerk. Leanne, is there a meeting of the CPC coming up soon?
We had one scheduled for yesterday, we had to cancel it, and we are going to reschedule it in the next month or 2, so you are correct.
Yeah.
Well, if it's in the next month or 2, we should be good until our next meeting, right?
Till our next meeting, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for the next meeting then. Probably the next most meaningful one is, well, they're all meaningful, but in terms of time commitment, after MRPC is probably the EDC being the next most time committed one. I previously was on it. I would be happy to give that one up and spend more time chairing this and chairing MRPC.
What's the frequency of meetings?
So the EDC actually needs to be rechartered. So the select board is gonna recharter it and then have a vision and goal setting session for it. So that's gonna determine a bunch of that. Historically, it met once a month, but conceivably, if it had ongoing projects, there could be committee involvement and stuff along the lines of that. It could be, dependent upon who ends up chairing it, it could be a pretty work-intensive committee, because in an ideal world, the EDC would be coming here and would be presenting to us what their plans are for like the sandpit zone and what their stakeholder feedback has been. And we would be working more as a decision-making body instead of having to pick up the ball and carry it and then make the decision. And the EDC would work more with like the Chamber of Commerce for like planning sessions and stuff like that.
Well, once a month wouldn't be undue burden for me, but I think if it were more frequent, I'd be a little concerned.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. Like I said,
And, you know, as my winter schedule is, I'm working remotely. So,
yeah, which is pretty common these days. So
okay.
I don't think that would be much of an impediment.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it depends upon who chairs it and whether or not they decide that hybrid meetings are appropriate.
Mhm.
I think almost every board and committee has decided that that is the case, but a chair could always be like in person only. They wouldn't be popular. They might not stay chair for long. But-
Okay, well, that's fine with me then.
Alright, so yeah, let's put that on the agenda for the next meeting, and let's make that we really are absolutely gonna get that done and get that moved to the next meeting. So, we'll need to coordinate and actually put together a spreadsheet, the columns of what we think, what they think, then have the select board bless it all. Okay. So, under matters not reasonably anticipated by chair, I anticipated everything this week, so, yeah, that's good. Public comments, anybody have anything that's not on the agenda, or anything else to comment about, any new business from the board to the board? Alright, so, with that, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Alright, hearing it
Second.
first. Alright, non-debatable, calling a vote,
Schneider, aye?
Carpenter, aye.
and the chair is aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Leanne, for putting